All right, so welcome to the first of a series of 3 live presentations that we'll be doing about the Tour du Mont Blanc. And thank you very much for joining us. My name is Marvin Faure, and I'm the founder and general manager of Alpine Cols, which is a group of cycling coaches based here in France. 4 of us are French, 1 is a New Zealand French, and myself, I'm Anglo-French. We're all based in the Alps. We're, of course, partners of Galazzo, of the people that organize the Tour du Mont Blanc and the Marmotte as well, which is great. And we're all, of course, passionate about road cycling and particularly about riding sportives and Grand Fondos, of which the Tour du Mont Blanc is undoubtedly the big one. This presentation is about guidelines for your personal training plan. It's going to last half an hour. And I'm recording it and I will make it available for replay afterwards. So you can go back to it or you can share it if you wish with your friends. I'll answer any questions at the end. Don't hesitate to send me questions by email to info@alpinecols.com and I'll reply to you just as soon as I can. So let's move through the presentation. And so the other 2 sessions are much later in the year, and they're really getting into the detail of the parcours, the actual course itself, and of course how to ride it. So much more specific about how to go about it on the day, which is why we scheduled those much closer to the event. Don't hesitate to join us for those as well. Be great to have you. So let's take a look at what it is, the Tour du Mont Blanc. I'm pretty sure you know this already, but just worth mentioning. Of course, it is often referred to as the toughest one-day sportive in the world. It's a loop around 3 countries, through 3 countries, I should say, through France, Switzerland, and Italy, around the highest mountain in Europe. I'm not going to go through the route in any detail today because we'll come back to that later. But suffice to say, the vital statistics, if you like, are huge. 338 kilometers and 8,500 meters of climbing. It's almost the height of Everest. These are absolutely huge numbers, and you mustn't take this event lightly. I really cannot emphasize too much how tough it is, and therefore how seriously you should take your preparation for it. One of our coaches, the New Zealander, he's called Silas Cullen, he calls the event a Marmotte on steroids. Whoops, I'm still here. Just for the anecdote, he finished it in 2013 in absolutely atrocious conditions, but in the remarkable time of 13 hours and 46 minutes, in spite of being completely unsupported and having to repair 2 punctures on the way. So it shows you how tough these Kiwis are. So riding the Tour du Mont Blanc, you'll take somewhere between 12 and 19 hours to finish it. 12 is remarkable. Very few people can get anywhere near that. 19 hours is the cutoff. So that's the window you've got. It's assuming you do manage to finish, obviously. If you do, you can be very proud of yourself because you'll be amongst the select few who found the mental and physical endurance to cycle around Europe's highest mountain in one day. And if you're not just a little bit apprehensive at the thought of it, you're either already an extremely accomplished ultra-distance cyclist, so you know what you're doing, or else you haven't thought enough about it yet. In a good year, the attrition rate is around 40%. It's better not to ask how high it is when the weather's bad. Everybody starts in the dark at 5 o'clock in the morning, and unlike this gentleman in the photo, most will or many anyway, will finish after nightfall, perhaps having to do the descent from the Cormier de Roseland in the dark, as well as the final climb. So it's above all an endurance challenge. And although all participants are timed, there's no official classification like a race, and everybody gets a gold certificate. It's really a challenge on 3 levels, mental, physical, and nutritional, and in that order, in my view. Being physically unfit or failing to eat and drink enough will definitely sabotage your ride as effectively as a catastrophic mechanical failure would. But the most likely reason to abandon is mental, in fact. The chances are, for most people anyway, it's the toughest thing you've ever done, certainly on a bike, if not, unless you're a Royal Marine or something, unless, in your life. At the halfway point, you'll have ridden almost the equivalent of the Marmot, but it's still only halfway. So to reach the finish, you're going to have to push yourself to your limits. You'll certainly experience some extraordinary highs where you'll feel euphoric. You'll feel some terrible lows when you feel despair. And you may well flip-flop back again. A lot of people find that you go from highs to lows throughout the evening, throughout the day. It's quite extraordinary. What does it take to finish this event? Before we get into the training plan, we need to take a look at this. Okay, we've broken it down into 3 different categories. There's a physiological category first, which is that you need quite exceptional aerobic endurance to be able to ride for up to 19 hours and do all that climbing. You need a high power to weight ratio. The higher, the better, obviously. If you're overweight, you're just struggling to carry all that unnecessary weight around. And on top of that, physiologically, you need the ability to recover quickly after each long climb. Every long climb is immediately followed by a descent, so you don't have much time, but you need to be able to recover quickly. Psychological demands are equally important. As we said, that it's really mental. You're likely to stop for mental reasons. You need to be able to stay positive. Let's just stay on psychological for the moment. You need to stay positive. You need to be able to maintain focus and stay lucid. You need to be able to stick to the plan. Technically, you need excellent climbing skills, descending and cornering skills, of course, but you also need the ability to refuel, to supply your energy needs, and you need the ability to be able to take your clothes, to adjust your clothing for these wide variations in temperature you get during the day. Now, we are not providing a standard training plan. We don't think a standard training plan makes any sense at all. Because the training plan needs to be unique to you. It cannot be standard. It's important. That's really important to get on board. And the training guidelines we'd give for the Tour du Mont Blanc are quite different to those we'd give for the Marmot or for the Étape du Tour. So you need a plan that's really been designed for you. Okay, we can't give you, without working with you specifically, we can't give you that because it wouldn't be the same. We have to know what your specific experience, context, and the rest of it are. Okay, so our goal in this presentation is to give you the means to think carefully about what you do need, and then to adapt your training plan for yourself. Okay, so the general principles are, first, you need, sorry, for some reason it's not moving on. Not quite sure why my clicker's refusing to work now. Okay, here we go. Sorry, apologies for that. So the first key principle is you need to build a very strong aerobic base. It's clearly an aerobic event. You're not going to be using your anaerobic energy at all. You're never going to be anything like sprinting, but you're not going to be pushing hard at threshold either, unless you are an incredibly. But even the strongest riders, they're going to take 12 hours to do this. You can't be pushing at threshold. It's something that Tour de France riders never do, for example, to ride so long. You need to do as much climbing as possible to build that ability to climb. You need to work to increase the load progressively, up to probably higher than it's ever been. Again, unless you're a really accomplished ultra endurance rider already, most of us never get anywhere near the sort of load you need to prepare this event properly. So that needs to come progressively. If you try to jump straight from riding what you might be now, who knows, 6 hours, 8 hours, perhaps 10 hours a week. If you try to go straight to 20 hours, 25 hours a week, it's not sustainable. So it's got to be progressive. You must build in rest and recovery periods. It's when you're resting and recovering that you get stronger. not when you're training. When you're training, you get weaker, you're breaking your body down, and the value of the training is when you rest and recover and build your muscles, rebuild and build stronger. So rest and recovery is absolutely the crucial part of training. The fifth principle is to work on both strengths and limiters that are obviously relevant to the Tour du Mont Blanc. There's no point in working on sprinting if that happened to be a limiter. It's pointless for the Tour du Mont Blanc, but it's clearly vital to work on your aerobic strength, on your climbing skills, on your descending skills, and some other skills we'll look at as well. So developing technical skills along with that are really important. Just to take a brief example of that, if your descending is relatively poor, you could lose 5 to 10 minutes on every descent, which would add up to well over an hour by the end of the day. And descending speed is free speed. It's just pure technique. There's no energy required. It's just the technical skill, the ability to descend faster, which brings that to you. So that you can learn, or you can be taught. It's not necessarily easy to learn by yourself, but you can certainly be taught. So looking at the training plan structure, these plans are this outline plan. It's not a plan in detail. It's very much a framework plan. It's available on the Tour du Mont Blanc website. You can find it under practical information, practical infos. If you can't find it there, then just send a request to me and I will send it to you. So the structure is based upon the notion of periods. So or phases. There's a first phase, which is the preparation phase, in which you would build towards at least 10 to 15 hours of training a week. That phase takes us up to the middle of April. There's a second phase we call pre-competition, which takes us up to the early beginning of July, when you want to build up towards, these are averages, of course, 15 to 20 hours a week. And then the final phase is the taper and competition phase, when you reduce the load in order to reduce your fatigue. You can see on the right-hand side here, this is just a schematic of the training volume, the load or the volume, on arbitrary units of 1 to 5. So early on, we're maxing out at an arbitrary unit of 3. First 3 weeks of building, then we drop to a recovery week, we build again, drop to a recovery week, and so on throughout the whole period. So there's this cycle of build and then recover, build and recover. If you're under 50, you want to use probably 4-week cycles are appropriate for most people. If you're over 50, recovery is a bit harder, and the recommendation there is to move to a 3-week cycle where you do 2 hard weeks and 1 week of recovery, or it can be a bit less than a week, perhaps 5 days, but that's the basic principle is that you need more recovery as you get older. This is the second page of the framework training plan, where we get into the detail of the suggested workouts. I'm not going to comment this in detail now. We'll look at a little bit of it later on in the presentation, but all of that is available for download on the website, as I already told you. Now, you need to customize the framework for yourself. Obviously, this is an example of the type of constraints that someone might have. So in April, there might be a week of Easter holiday with the family where no training is possible. So the time available to train in that week is 0. In other weeks, it might be 15. You might have a work trip, which knocks off, which means you can only train during the weekend, and so on and so forth. So whatever your constraints are, you need to map them out on a calendar, look at them, and then see what's the maximum time you have available to train week by week, and then build out your program that way, trying as much as possible to respect this idea of building load during 3 weeks and then recovering for 1 week, or building load for 2 weeks and recovering for 1 week. That's ideal. In real life, of course, one can never quite reach the ideal, but you do what you can to try to respect that principle. Now, you also need to customize the focus. Your 2020, that should read 2021, your objectives, is it exclusively the Tour du Mont Blanc, or do you have another major objective that you're equally keen to do well at, in which case your training plan needs to take account of that. For the purposes of this evening, I'm assuming you're 100% focused on the Tour du Mont Blanc, It's obviously more complicated if you have to write a plan for 2 events in the same season, but it's perfectly possible, but it's more complicated. You should also customize your plan for your particular strengths and limiters, whatever they are for you, which are obviously not the same as necessarily as someone else. So now let's look at the specific objectives in the first phase, the preparation phase, which is taking us from now until mid-April. The first objective is to build your training capacity, your ability to hold or to manage or to accept the load, if you will, and to build your aerobic endurance. So what that means is you want to be able to train for at least 10 to 12 hours or more per week, and probably the bulk of that on the weekends. You might be looking at getting up to training to 8 or even 10 hours on the weekend without undue fatigue. Whatever number you're at now, build progressively towards that target. You need to learn by the end to be able to ride for 16 to 18 hours through the mountains in one single day. So there's no easy way to do that. You've just got to build progressively the time on the bike, and preferably in the mountains, or at least in the hills, wherever you may live. There's no way you can do these the Tour du Mont Blanc full gas or anything even remotely approaching full gas. It's physiologically totally impossible. So you've got to be able to do this at steady endurance pace. Okay, the second objective, which has some sense in this first part of the year, is to build your endurance at threshold. So at a little bit above the intensity you're going to be riding at on the Tour du Mont Blanc. Okay, this is if the faster you are, the stronger rider you are, the higher this priority would be. And also, of course, if you've got other objectives, you would need to do some of this. Okay, you don't want to do too much. It's maximum 1 a week, and it's a few intervals. We'll get into the details in a minute. Okay, and finally, the other objective of this period is to work on technical skills, particularly things like descending and cornering at speed, perhaps eating on the bike if you're not too comfortable with that, adjusting your clothing on the bike, being able to take a jacket off or put it back on. These are really helpful skills that can help you save a lot of time on the day. The less experienced you are, the more important it is to build those skills. Okay, in the detail then, what to do on the bike. Well, the first is to progress to longer rides, so up to 6 hours or even a little longer if you can, in zone 2. Now, what is zone 2? If you don't know what that means, if you have a heart rate monitor or a power meter, you probably know your zones. It's 70 to 75% of what your maximum heart rate is, or what your FTP is if you have a power meter. If you're in any doubt, it's better to err on the cautious side. On the Tour du Mont Blanc, you're going to be low zone 2. You're not going to be at the top of zone 2. The ride should feel slow. You should be able to talk to someone if you're riding with someone, without it being hard to talk. Okay, aerobic endurance is absolutely by far the most important quality you need to build. So you should be spending 90% of your training time on this, and include in that as much low intensity climbing as possible. Maybe 1 interval session per week on threshold type intervals, first in the early part of the year, just in zone 3, so it's not yet threshold. Tempo efforts, fairly short, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, out to 10 minutes, progressing eventually to 20 and even 30 minutes. But again, initially in zone 3, and then by mid-April, you can be progressing into zone 4. But there's no point in going above threshold. This is all, around the 90%, between 80 and 90% of threshold. Okay, best to do these intervals at low cadence, around 50 to 60 RPM. But again, no more than 1 a week. Don't push them too hard. Be careful of your knees. Make sure you've got a decent bike fit when you're doing them at low cadence. Okay, do some exercises for your technical skills. So these are high-speed cornering, descending, taking a jacket on and off, all that type of good stuff. Okay. If you're not a confident descender, then it's consider joining, if you can, a training camp in the mountains with a coaching team who's qualified to teach you how to do it. It's like skiing. It's technique, and it's not that easy to learn for yourself. It's much easier if you've got somebody looking at you and telling you what you're doing wrong and what you can do to improve, maybe with some video feedback and so on. So we offer that obviously on our training camps. So would love to see you with us if you'd like to do that. Now, you may or may not be used to working to training off the bike. I strongly recommend it. It can have a significant impact on your performance. To cycle faster, you need to be able to push harder on the pedals, which means you need not only stronger leg muscles, but you also need a stronger core in order to be able to stabilize and channel that extra force going through your legs. Okay, and the best way to strengthen your muscles is off the bike. You simply can't strengthen them enough on the bike. You can't put the same load on your muscles on the bike that you can in a gym using appropriate exercises and good technique. You don't need to go to a gym with fancy machines. You can do it at home with relatively light weights, with a lot of floor exercises, but you do need to know what you're doing. Okay, so strength and conditioning, the purpose is to develop the strength at this time of year. Strongly recommend you be guided by a decent strength and conditioning coach with experience in cycling, because if you're new to it, you can easily hurt yourself. I know that from experience. I did myself some quite a nasty injury when I was first doing strength and conditioning, simply because my movements were incorrect, my position was incorrect. Okay, so you don't want to injure yourself, so get some help on it. Okay, also equally important is to work on mobility and flexibility. The more you cycle, the more you need to do this. And again, the goal at this time of year is to develop it. So a couple of sessions per week, 2 or 3 20-minute sessions is probably a minimum. Pilates or yoga are great things, great techniques to do. But again, learning correct technique is vital. So I strongly recommend you find a practitioner who's skilled, who knows cycling, and only takes small groups so you can get really detailed feedback. Ideally, individually, of course, if you have the opportunity or you can afford that. Complement that occasionally with some activities off the bike. It's great to do some occasional running if you enjoy it, swimming, or even just walking. The problem is, if cycling is your only sport, you risk building up imbalances and soft tissue problems over time. So it's not great to be a pure cyclist. Okay, it's much better to build in some other activities occasionally, and sometimes that can really help with the family, whether it be your kids or your better half, your partner. You can possibly spend more time with them doing that, which of course gives you a better, more options to get out on the bike later. Okay, now we're going to talk about the second major phase, the pre-competition phase. What are the objectives at this moment? It's of course to increase endurance and training capacity. So we're pushing harder and going further, or not so much pushing harder. We're really, because we're maintaining the same intensity, but we're definitely pushing further. We need to continue to emphasize recovery to ensure that our bodies are adapting and accepting the load. And very important, we need to test any and all equipment, nutrition, and indeed hydration choices that you might use on the day to make sure they work. Never ever go to an event that's important to you, and particularly something like the Tour du Mont Blanc, with equipment or nutrition that you haven't extensively tested in advance. You just never know. It's not because your friend or a guy in the shop tells you it's the best shorts, for example, or the best this or the best that or the best food, that it will work for you. The only way to find out if it works for you is to test it. What to do, the detail, what to do on the bike. So here you're now going to progress out to 9 or 10 hour rides, even a little more if you can. Try to stay in zone 2. This becomes harder and harder A 10-hour ride in zone 2 is seriously fatiguing, tiring. That's why it's essential to recover afterwards. You can't do trying to do 2 10-hour rides back to back would be very, very challenging for nearly everybody. You can initially obviously split it into 2. You can perhaps do 12 hours over a weekend, perhaps 4 on one day, 8 the next, or 5 on one, 7 the next, or whatever works for you. Do the long rides. Of course, it's best to do them with somebody else. Ideally, if you know somebody else training for the Tour du Mont Blanc, do them together. But you need an understanding training partner who's willing to ride with you at the right speed and stick at the low intensity. It's best to stay away from the Sunday club rides because they're generally too short and too fast. It's not going to help you for the Tour du Mont Blanc. Okay. The recovery rides need to be very short, really 2 hours absolute maximum. 1 hour is fine, and stick to zone 1 only. Don't let yourself drift into zone 2 on a recovery ride. The goal of a recovery ride is just to get the blood flowing, flush out the toxins, and accelerate your recovery. So you're not helping yourself at all if you push hard on a recovery ride. Make the easy weeks really easy. Okay. As I've said already, test the equipment and nutrition so you know exactly what works and what doesn't work. Practice changing clothing, practice anything that you're going to have to do on the Tour du Mont Blanc itself. Off the bike, keep going with strength and conditioning, but now you're no longer pushing hard to develop strength. You're just maintaining it. If you don't try and maintain it as I said earlier, it's in the gym. You're putting the biggest loads on your legs. So if you don't do any at all, you won't be maintaining your strength. You'll actually be losing leg strength. So it's important to do some to maintain it. And same with mobility and flexibility. If you don't do some yoga or some stretching, you will lose it. It's for sure. So it's important to do that. Complementary activities, just the same. Make sure you do some, particularly in your recovery weeks, do some long walks or go swimming. Anything to keep the body turning over, but without stressing it. On top of that, it's really important to think about maximizing your sleep. Which is the best way to recover. Actually, the more you can sleep, the more you'll recover. Aim at a minimum of 8 hours per night and try to wake up naturally without an alarm clock as much as possible. Banish all the screens from the bedroom. High quality nutrition, the least possible travel. Obviously at the moment with COVID, that's probably not an issue, but the less stress you've got, the better. Now we come to the final phase, the competition phase, the taper phase, some people call it, just before the competition. So here the objectives are, of course, completely different. Here the objective is to eliminate fatigue while maintaining your fitness. So you can't do nothing. If you do nothing, you'll start to lose fitness. You'll obviously eliminate fatigue, but you also start to lose fitness. So you do need to do some training, but it's much less than you were doing before. Okay, the key objective is to arrive on the start line the fittest you've ever been, but super fresh. Okay, so what do you actually do? Well, reduce your training volume by a good 50%. Okay, so that means taking it down. You probably take it down progressively. The first week you can take it down by 60 to 70%, and then the second week by a good 50%, maybe even a wee bit more. And then, and of course, limit the intensity, but don't take it down to 0. You don't want to do everything in zone 1. You want to stick to zone 2, maybe even do a little bit in zone 3, just to keep the muscles awake and keep them ticking over. You ideally want to plan to arrive in Les Saisies 2 or 3 days before the start. The earlier, the better, really. And then do a couple of short rides in the area to spin the legs, but nothing strenuous. I mean, you don't want to start going out and doing 6-hour rides in the mountains just 2 or 3 days before the event. Okay, picture of a beach just to emphasize the need for relaxation in these final 2 to 3 weeks. the critical need to sleep well. Try to plan this in advance. Make sure you're not going to have anything that's going to stress you, anything that's going to cut into your ability to sleep, to eat well with really good quality nutrition. Make sure you stay supple and so on. So, all of these things are obvious, but the more you can plan for it, the more likely you'll come to the start in the best possible condition. Okay, so that's we've reached the end of the presentation. Just a quick word on the support we can provide you. Don't hesitate to send me questions. I'll be delighted to respond. info@alpinecols.com. See our website for the availability of training camps. Probably the best one is in La Clusaz in the Northern Alps, quite close to Geneva. It's easy to get to. We're running a week training camp there from the 6th to 13th of June, which will be largely focused on, everyone coming to that will be doing either the Marmont or the Tour du Mont Blanc or the Étape du Tour. So it'll be very, very much focused around those types of events, and you'll come away from that with significantly increased skills and lots of hints and tips about how to ride the event. We spend a lot of time focusing on technique. It's not so much about riding hard. It's more about it's of course riding long distances, climbing, improving your skills, both going up and going down. Okay, and finally, if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, we're delighted to work with people one-on-one. We're working with a lot of people at the moment, of course, for the Tour du Mont Blanc and other events. Don't hesitate to contact me for more details on that if you're interested. There are details on the website, of course. We'd be delighted to work with you. So there we are. We've reached the end. Thank you very much for your time. Delighted to have you, and look forward to seeing you on the start line, if not before. Thank you. Good evening. Good luck with your training, and see you later.